But Cardi B appears to believe the budget cuts in New York City come from the executive branch of the United States. She appears to believe that. And she's really upset at Biden because of the budget cuts in New York City. Now, she's tried to backtrack and say, oh, well, she really meant Mayor Eric Adams, but that doesn't appear that doesn't sound like what she said. And Cardi B, whether or not we want to admit it, she has a massive, massive, massive following. And so she said she's not going to endorse or support, whatever the case may be, allegedly, any other president because of what's happening in New York City. Listen to this.
So we are going to be having a budget cut on these, mind you. And this is why I said I'm not. This is what I'm telling y'all. I'm not this year. Don't ask me. I don't give a the resume that they send. I don't give. I'm not endorsing no presidents no more. Because how is there a $100 million budget cut in New York City for schools, library, police safety, and sanitation? Yeah, Joe Biden's talking about like, yeah, we could fund two wars. We could fund two wars. Because talking about we don't got it, but we got it. Like we're the greatest nation. No, we're not. We're going through some right now. They don't want to say the word, but we're going through a recession right now. We really, really, really are. And Major Eric said it. There's a budget cut going on in New York. And little by little, it's going to go in your states.
Okay, so let me say this, then I want you to take it, Eljoy, because I don't know if people understand how allocating of funds work. But I do want to point out one really important thing. The infrastructure bill gave New York over $1 billion. That's just the state of New York. And I believe, and also gave $350 million in competitive funding. That's really important. The infrastructure bill is also given millions of dollars to to state of Ohio, Mississippi, Pennsylvania. Really, really important to point out. But I want to say this. Even if there was no conflict in Israel and Ukraine, these budget cuts still would have happened under a mayor named Eric Adams. Even if there was no conflict whatsoever, just if mind you, we've been dealing with Israel for decades now, but even if what happened on October 7th didn't happen, even if Russia wouldn't have invaded Ukraine, whatever the case may be, this still would have happened. It's really important to point out, right? Let's say the federal government gave New York $500 trillion. Let's say it just threw it down and said, here you go. The federal government and executive branch, Biden, even Congress, they have no control on how the state allocates those funds to cities. This is part of the issue with Demon Governor Mr. Confederacy, Tate Reeves in Mississippi, that they were getting funding, and according to the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, it wasn't being properly allocated. The mayor or the local city government, they control how funds are allocated. So when I heard this, Eljo, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so exhausting. But you're the empress of civics. Break it down for us, Eljoy, and break down how this misinformation is really harmful. I don't know if she's I don't think she's intentionally trying to be harmful, but it's harmful. And there is this element of celebrity as well. Break it down for us.
Well, you said a whole lot and she said a whole lot. So I wouldn't be a civics teacher if I didn't break down sort of what you're talking about. There is a difference between misinformation and disinformation. So first, misinformation, there is no intent behind it. People are not intentionally trying to dissuade you from participating or give you false information for you to stay home or things of that nature. So I always use the example, the KKK meddles in disinformation. Your cousin posting on Facebook is misinformation, right? Like there's the difference. And I think what Cardi posted is a prime example of how misinformation gets peddled and how it spreads. Whether or not she was a celebrity or not, because more oftentimes it is your cousin, your nephew, or your auntie who is spreading and believing misinformation that is posted. And this is what's so dangerous about that, is that could be some well intentions, but because you haven't, as the spokesperson, if you will, this being Cardi, you haven't made sure that your information is correct. Because of the platform that you have, then it is liable to spread more, and people are more susceptible to believe what you have said and what you have posted. And then even when you backtrack and sort of post a correction or information, it doesn't permeate as much as what you initially said. This is the same thing in media, right? When they put something and then the correction is a small bit in the bottom, or on the 5th page that nobody is really paying attention to. And so the first thing is making sure that anybody who is posting anything, whether you post it on TikTok, Facebook, or what have you, is to fact check and make sure you have the information. Because I had all sorts of fact check for Miss Cardi. One, it's not millions of dollars. Do you know how big the New York City budget is? It's billion with a B, right? So the cuts are not even millions, it's millions to different agencies. But overall, there's a $7 billion gap over multiple years, right? So there's one, making sure you have the information correct in that aspect. And two, that you're just not accepting what is being told by one particular person. The Mayor Adams, is saying the cuts 5% across the board, no matter what agency, is because of the migrant crisis. We know that's not true. We had a budget gap before that even happened, right?
Exactly.
So, right,
and then they like to scapegoat. There's that too. Yeah.
Right. So there is that. So you have to be mindful of the information that's come out, and it sounds good, because here's what I think. And you and I were texting back and forth, but regarding this, here's what I think. I know for a fact Cardi B knows exactly the difference between federal, city, and state. If you know Cardi, Lord, you know her, politics and just the structure of government is something that she knows. But this is what happens. Even if you know something, know it in your head, but then when you don't take the moment to pause and make sure the information that you're saying or peddling in is correct, and that you are communicating in a way that it can't be misconstrued, then you are susceptible to misinformation as well. Clay, we are all susceptible to it if we don't correct and make sure that we're saying something that's true. The other thing I think that's happening is it is the latest trend from a social media standpoint to hate on Biden. That is the latest thing to do. Well, I feel like somebody could do an ad, you come out your house and you stub your toe and be like, God damn Biden, right? It's like everything is his fault. That is the latest thing to do. And particularly if you live online, like folks like Cardi do, right? Like in social, Instagram, TikTok, or whatever, everything is the president's fault. And that is the culture we have collectively, not saying you and I, but that is the culture we have cultivated in this one person being responsible, right? Not to mention the mayor can propose budget cuts all he wants, but he's still gonna have to negotiate with the city council in order to get the budget done in the first place. So it's not even as if he alone can make these cuts, right? There is still that work that has to be done. And I tweeted about this when he first made the proposal and saying, okay, we got to give the city council backup to push back against the executive branch of the city, that being the mayor, in going forward with these cuts, right? So you have to inform and educate on your way. And the number one thing is you have to make sure you have the facts right. And it is up to her. It is her fault to peddle in this misinformation and not have your facts straight, because you know for a fact that you have a large audience. To the point, in one of the videos she talked about, she was like, oh, usually when I start, I have 40 million people or 40,000 people on here. So you have a big audience. So it is your responsibility to make sure that the information that you are sharing is truthful.
The other thing, too, is that, and she later backtracked and said, if you heard what I said, I did mention Mayor Eric Adams. But here's my question too. Did you support Maya Wiley, who ran for mayor of New York City? Did you support Diane Morales, who ran for mayor of New York City? Like if according to what you said that she does know but she got impacted by misinformation, we had an entire long, arduous
Very long.
campaign for mayor. It was very long, and a lot of people warned us about Mayor Eric Adams. I'm not a fan of Mayor Eric Adams. And folks, there was I loved Maya Wiley. I mean, so if you have these complaints about your local and city government, right? Were you involved in local and city elections? She has this massive campaign. Imagine if she would have had an interview. I mean, if this is the kind of impact she wants to have with the Maya Wiley, we had an entire election. And so this is where voting really does matter. I don't think someone like Maya Wiley would have proposed a 5% budget cut. I don't think she would have done that. I don't think she would have scapegoated the migrant crisis. So I always ask these questions when I see pop stars and celebrities and rappers suddenly being political. Did you support a primary? Did you support the local election? Because I understand the outrage over proposed budget cuts. But did you support the person who has control over that? So that's a really big question. Even when folks were during the 2020 election, they were mad that President Joe Biden got the nomination. Did you support the folks in the primary? Because you had Senator Cory Booker, you had Senator at the time Kamala Harris, you had plenty of other people. Were you out there outraged, calling for certain agendas, supporting folks in a primary? This election, it's a process. So I don't, Eldra, I don't know if she knows. I mean, maybe it's just misinformation. But I think either way, it's an impact on her audience. And that is what disturbs me. Do you really care? And she even says she lives in New Jersey. Do you really care? Or do you just feel like because you're rich and famous, this goes for any celebrity, you're rich and famous, people should listen to me because I have money and I'm rich and famous. You know what I'm saying?
But I think this goes
arrogance of it all.
Yeah, but I think this also goes to your point earlier in terms of us looking to celebrities and entertainers to match our politics or to inform us rather than looking internally, right? And identifying and knowing what your political values are, what you value, and not looking for the people who entertain you to also be the people who inform you.
So break it down. I mean, I did it a bit at the top, Eldra, but break it down if just somebody out there is watching and they're seeing this or they're hearing this. How does funding work when it goes to the federal government, state, city, local? Make it plain for the audience, for folks who may not know, who want to understand. Maybe they saw what Cardi said. Now they really want to understand. That could be a good thing, right? So break it down on how these things work. Who has the control? Who has the purse strings in your neighborhood, in your city, and so on?
Yeah. And I really like that as an example that anytime you see anybody or a trending topic, it should prompt you to look it up and fact check and search rather than accepting what is being said. So we all know there are three branches of government: federal, state, and local. I always like to start local first because that is where you live, right? That is your day to day. And even in your local community, whether it be New York City, Philadelphia, or what have you, in New York City, the mayor and the city council, which replicates what happens on the federal level, there is an executive branch, i.e. the mayor. On the federal level, it is the president. On the state level, it is the governor. And then the legislative branch. In New York City, that is the city council. In the state, it's the state legislature. And on the federal level, it is Congress. And in every instance, from the federal level, the Congress holds the purse strings. So even when there was commentary before about the war of saying Biden can't send this money, Biden absolutely can't send that money. Congress does, right? Just like Congress is the only entity that can actually declare war. So you need to, yes, communicate to Biden, but more importantly, also communicate to Congress and those who represent you in Congress on the same thing. On the state level, budget is negotiated between the governor and the state legislature. And on the local level, that is negotiated between the mayor and the city council. Now, there are some variations, because I know a few of y'all gonna be like, well, in my town, USA, it's the county executive and not the mayor. I know. But what I'm saying is that there is a budget process that one person does not control on their own. It is a negotiation with an executive and a legislative entity. So don't actually be like on Twitter, because I know that to be true. But what would happen, Clay, if we had a mayor, if we had leadership that said, I'm not going to cut the most vulnerable, I'm not going to have the people who have the least to sacrifice the most? I bet you if Mayor Eric Adams would have said, well, Wall Street gonna have to figure out how to deal, because we're gonna cut back services here, or we're gonna cut, things related to the most wealthy, or I know, we're going to ask the most wealthy to pay more. Maybe not pay. Actually, let's just ask them to pay their fair share. If we did that, how that would go over. I bet you people would find something real quick if somebody stood up for those who were the least of us and said, we're not going to cut them. So we need to figure out how to make sure that people pay their fair share or more.